Hey guys, Alexander Williamson here with the secret history living inside of your aquarium. So tonight, whatever this is, we're going to be talking a little bit about how there is a cherry shrimp that must have gotten in on the plants. So let me take care of that first real quick. And we're going to be talking about aquascaping. So first of all, when you create an aquascape, you want to plan out how you're going to be doing, so what plants you want and what sort of tank you want. So when I say what sort of tank you want, I mean, do you want a tank that you can look at and it's real pretty, but you can't net stuff out of it very easily, and you have to put fertilizers in it, and you have to trim it, and you have to do this, and you have to do that, and yada, yada, yada. So that's the first thing you have to decide. And if it's okay that you want to have a high maintenance tank in which is not as easily accessed as a, I don't know, some would say functional tank, then you can go to town, get all your plants, you can carpet, you can do fertilizers and CO2. What I've chosen to do here is a functional tank that I'll be able to breed different species inside of and have somewhat of an aesthetic to it, but not one that I'm going to have to mess with a ton. So the way I'm going to achieve that is by using the rocks as my main feature. And these are just rocks that I got from basically a rockery. I asked the guy who was an architect where he got these rocks in front of his house, and he ordered in by the ton, like I think 6 dump truck loads or something crazy like that. And so I just said, great, cool. Can I give you some money for a few? And he said, are you kidding me? Just, go for it. So I didn't go buy these from any fancy place. A couple things that I did hide behind this so that it's a functional tank is I left some room here in the way I position things, and I put the little yurt that my gobies have been using, or they're not actually gobies, they're called peacock, people call them peacock gobies or rainbow gobies, but they're actually gudgeons. They're peacock gudgeons, and I think my hides are working for them because I don't see any out and about right now. There's one right here. So the plan is they have been using the little yurt hut made out of clay or pottery, ceramic, terracotta. Knew I'd get there eventually. And then this holy rock, and I don't mean in a spiritual way. They've been using that also as caves to spawn. Now, other than that, what I want out of this tank is I want to be able to see my shrimp, because before they were always hiding in this back corner with these plants. And hopefully these rocks will serve as an algae spot for them. And then I want to keep it much lower this time. And so that also helps as a functional tank. If I keep this low by using crypts and buse or carpeting plants, and do that low, and then in the back I will do a very thin layer of maybe one row like this thick. Let's look at it from above. I'll do a row probably this thick if you look at the whole tank, so maybe 2 deep but planted densely across of some sort of greenery. And by greenery, I probably mean something red. I'll probably throw Java fern in for now. But I want something to really contrast with the foreground. And in basic aquascaping, you need a horizon point or a focal point. And you want to use the rule of thirds. Now, I've kind of broken that up, and it's almost too perfect here in that it's straight back, it slopes up, it looks like, it's spot on to almost like a design, but that's okay for me, for my taste right now. we'll get into theory of Dutch versus Japanese practices and things like that, and Amono versus new wave styles of things. But the bottom line is you want to have a setup in which plants and fish and shrimp or snails can all coexist in harmony, and it looks good. So I like to keep it simple, stupid, as they say. And so I'm going to use things like I've got bowls ready here I've got this, was it Hygrophila compacta, or some mimosa. I can't remember the exact name right now, but it's called temple plant usually, if you get it at Petco or one of those places. So I'm going to make a fake forest in the midground and staggered around, probably back in here around the heater, and then we'll have the wall back here, and then over here we'll have very, very low grasses and things. In this bucket here, which is probably too dark for you to see, I have all sorts of different plants, everything from wood and plants. I like to get that stuff ready and kind of have it on hand, and I actually kept it right in the same water that it had been in. So while I was doing this today, I've got my Java ferns here. I can toss those back in. I'm not going to anchor those down right away or anything, because I already know that that's not my game plan. My game plan is not going to be to keep Java ferns there. That's just going to be to help with ammonia and nitrogen and all that, which I do in all the planted tanks I have. Now, I chose not to use an active substrate, and by that I mean the substrate can be something like Fluval, EcoComplete, or ADA Amazonia, or there's a whole bunch out there. You can look around and see what there is, and there's everything from inert clay pellets that they have a neutral pH or even a buffering pH to keep things more basic rather than acidic. And then there's also some that are slanted the other way, but that's less common. And then there are like Amazonia and things like that, and EcoComplete. They actually have ammonia, nitrogen, phosphates, things like that built in that your plants need. But when you do that, you need to make sure that you have a really well cycled tank, and that you probably want to not have fish in it until the ammonia cycles through. So that could be anywhere from a few days for your fish being safe to like a few months, depending on how much you're using and how sensitive the fish or shrimp are. I'm keeping shrimp, so I didn't want to have to deal with that. This tank's been up and running for only about 2 months, I want to say now, maybe 3. And I obviously have shrimp in here, and they're very sensitive to ammonia spikes. So that's the plan on this tank, kind of. And then let me show you what I used for substrate. So first off, and I'm walking with the camera lens covered because I know people say they get dizzy when I walk. I went to Petco and I got just their regular old gravel. And that's the orangish colored stuff in the tank over there. The other stuff that I got, I traded my cherry shrimp that I was growing in the tank beside it for fluorite black and fluorite black sand. And so this is like a crushed gravel. So they call this gravel, but you can see it's very, very fine. Now with this product, I always wash it. So I had a colander, and then I have a little bit of extra water in here too. I have used chlorinated water, so it's probably going to be a good idea just to, I'll probably, since the tank's not totally full of water, what I'll do is I'll put just a couple of drops of dechlorinator in, shake it around, just in case, for peace of mind. Let that sit for a little bit while we head back over there. But I just wanted to say that if you don't have a substrate with nutrients in it for your plants, then you're going to need to supplement that. And you could do that in many ways, but they range from everything from, you know, some people use compost in big like outdoor pond setups and things like that. Other people use chicken poop, or just their fish poop is enough. It really just depends on what your load is and how your tank has cycled up in a functional sense. Now, aesthetically, I don't mind, because with the Eco Complete and the Amazonia and stuff like that, that actually has properties to it that help plants grow. To me, it makes it tougher, because then I have to change it out every 6 months to a year and a half or something like that. Plus, it breaks down and it gets kind of clay, like muddy-ish. Sometimes it clouds up for over a day when I'm doing the scape. So what I choose to use is some root tabs, and then usually I load the tank up pretty heavily with fish, and then just do a lot of water changes. Like once a week I'll do like a 30% water change or 40% water change or something like that, and that keeps the tank nice and clear and clean. And then I don't have a crazy powerful light on or anything like that. We've got a pretty modest light on the tank currently. There's the bluer hint of it, which shows off the stone rather nicely. Another thing that I'm trying to decide is how I want to situate this stone here. It almost sits a little too nicely. I'm considering lifting it as such, rather than allowing it to form a solid range. I don't know. I haven't made up my mind there. I can always come back and fiddle with that. But in the meantime, I need to add this, and there are critters in here. So if you're doing this with fish in the tank, which I don't necessarily recommend if you can help it, but I didn't have a good spot to put all these critters and fish, and so I always kind of brush away the creatures that I know might be down there. So in this case, I know that that shrimp was there. I could see him. There's not too many plants in here, and most critters will abandon ship when the plants come out of the tank. So I didn't worry too much about it. But essentially, I just needed some more substrate to work with. And see, we're still going to get this cloudiness effect. It'll die down rather quickly, but you're still going to get cloudiness whenever you scape a tank. And so another trick with this tank, since we've got so much of the volume of the water taken up by rock, something like 4 gallons of this container is rock, we are going to, and you know, the other trick is you can take a look at how you like different substrates, like the color. Like, do I want this all black, or what am I going for here? And really, the reason I'm adding this is so that I have something to plant in. It's not even an aesthetic thing. It's not a health thing. It's totally just because I wanted a little more substrate to put plants into. I wanted a good 1.5 inch depth for some of the roots of things that I work with. And then also it gives me the freedom in the future to decide, oh, I want to do this or that. I want to take this slope and have it come upward more, or whatever. But right now, I'm kind of given the opportunity, just out of a happy coincidence, I can take a look at how predominantly, and sorry guys that I'm zoomed in so close, I'm trying to do both at the same time, and maybe I should have set up a tripod type thing, but I just wanted to get this. I didn't think it'd take too long, so I'm gonna grab some more from back here, sprinkle that over this stuff, grabbing some more, and then we're back down to bedrock level, as I'm gonna call it. But basically, I wanted to take a look and see what an all black tank would look like. I had a feeling it may be too dark against these stones, but you know, I'm not all that convinced that it actually looks too bad. It definitely stood out more with the orange tannish stones, but this is all just a game where you play. So this is called the hardscaping. And the last thing I'm going to say in this video before I log off, and then in the next video you'll see it planted up somewhat. And it'll be a process of fiddling with things because that's the fun part, right? But basically, when you're aquascaping, you have two routes to go in two different subject matters. So you have the route of, do I want this to be a working tank that I can breed fish in and grab fish out of and put fish into and work with in that way? Or do I want it to have enough hiding spots that I just kind of set it and forget it, but I need to keep up with the plants quite a bit? But as far as the fish go, you put them in and you kind of let them go wild. But I mean, like if you have shrimp, for instance, and you're trying to cull shrimp, it's a terrible setup to try to have a bunch of plants and a bunch of shrimp to try to get a strain down. You really want to have a breeder tank or a very bare tank, like leave it like this, maybe have a water floating water vegetation of some sort, or some Sirwassertong or something like that. But something that's movable that the shrimp can't hide in, or small fish, even like guppies. And I'm going to be doing endlers in here, these tiger endlers that I've had in here. Where are they off to? Back in there. So I want to be able to see the babies and know when I have things, and so we're going to do kind of the happy medium of the two routes. Now the next route, I already covered that earlier, but the next route is something new that I want to talk about, and that is the idea of the two forms of aquascape in my mind are looking at the world as though it is miniature. So we're looking for scale, and the fish kind of are birds, and these stones are cliffs or mountains or a mountain top, and the ground would be, you know, the forest floor below, like at Yosemite National Park, or you know, somewhere in Thailand or whatever you're going to plant it with. But you don't want to put like a big potted plant type thing like right here if you're doing that. Now, so that's one way to look at it, is almost like a miniature train set. And in that case, you want to use low to the ground carpeting plants. You want to use low light, slow growing plants, or plants that you can heavily trim back, like grasses and dwarf tiers, and or baby dwarf tiers, and things like that. You know, Monte Carlo. You can look up foreground or carpeting plants if you want. But so you've got that choice of doing it, making it look like a miniature landscape, and that's kind of the Amono or natural tank, where it sort of originated in the Japanese tradition. And Taiwan, Singapore, South Korea, and China have all been into it. Philippines and Indonesia have all been into that for a while. Whereas the Dutch style of aquascaping, or Eastern European and Western European, just European in general for the most part, as well as Northern Africa like Morocco and Algeria, their style is a little more of, you push it full of green, and then you have your highlights in plants, and the whole tank is planted up, and wood is a little bit less of a feature generally. And then there's a whole new scape, which is like a barren scape, where they would just leave this and they'd build things like nests almost out of wood and sculpturize it rather than keeping it strictly natural looking. But with this miniature setup, which I think I'm going to stick to somewhat, you want to keep things in scale. So you want to have low plants in the front, high plants in the back, and on the cliffs, if you will, you would want small plants that grow slowly, and then maybe in the background you can have some flares of color or whatnot. I'm going to be using the temple plant looking like trees in the mid background, kind of parallel to the mountain range. and then probably using grasses and things like that trimmed low, so that the front of the tank I can get to. The shrimp will be drawn to feed out here. I'll put their feeding dish here each night and try to kind of train them to come out. And then the other style between those is having an emulation of nature. So the emulation of nature is more like a riverbed or a lake bed. And with that style, you'd be putting in, a piece of wood like such. You'd have it coming into the tank, life size, or maybe a little smaller just for the sake of it. You could put like a branch coming out of the tank, coming up into, more foliage up above. And in that style, you don't need to worry about scale quite as much. You still want a sense of pulling the eye inward or to one of the quadrants. Look up the rule of thirds. I can explain it in another video, but basically if you draw a line here, 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 and here, you want to be able to split everything up and have it balanced in all those directions, and have this point, this point, this point, and this point having something interesting going on. So you got something up here if you have something here, or you have two things here for this much and then it slopes. But basically you want to try to either balance it or skew it so heavy that it looks intentional if you're doing it askew. So those are kind of the fundamentals of it. You also get into later looking at horizon lines, that is, or vanishing points, and that is like if you were small looking up at this scape, how can you play with the perspective of the viewer who's usually above or looking straight on at it. And all of that stuff is a lot more complex, and we'll get into that in other videos. But I wanted to show you this hardscape I'm working on. A couple little things before I finish up the video. I thought that it would be fun to kind of, and we'll do some of this sloping that I was talking about, where you're brushing back towards the back, so it's a little lifted if you see on the side here. And we'll make that more of a gradual slope in the future. But you're doing that so that the tank appears to go up almost like a stage would, like an amphitheater, and it draws the eye into believing that there is something up in the center that it's like almost like it's a trail leading you into it, tricking your eye. Now, also, if you have too much of the same thing, like if your substrate is too black or too whatever, I think that personally, unless you're doing something kind of new age with it, I think that also can look awkward. And realistically, you're going to be disturbing this substrate quite a bit if you're gravel vacuuming and doing things like that. And that's where I think it's kind of silly to try to do too much with those elements. I kind of work with them a little bit and then just kind of call that good. I kind of sprinkle in and clear out in between rocks after I dump it in. A lot of people do sculpting dry. I actually prefer wet for some reason. It's just a personal preference. There's certain cases where that's not true if I'm going to be grafting moss or tying different plants onto different materials. But for this level of scaping, I'm happy to do it with the fish in the tank, doing it slow and methodically so I'm not stressing them out terribly. They are going to be stressed though, and then kind of excavating my own work a little bit as I go, because I've buried some of what I did just by the nature of pouring all that gravel in. So another little trick or tidbit that is going on here, and I'm going to move stuff around a little bit. Sometimes you also look at it later and you're like, I think this or that needs to be slightly different. And so that's all just part of the, to me, fun of Escape. And I like to change mine up frequently. Some people want to just never have to switch it up, and they want to get it done with, and that's that. But I personally like playing with the scape a little bit. So yeah, I'll probably continue to fiddle with things and change things as I get new plants and all of that jazz. But basically, for a functional tank, as I was saying, these substrates, if you have anything other than the one kind of thing that you bought, like if you have two types of gravel, they will not stay stratified if you're doing gravel vacs all the time, and if you're planting, and that's when you would do a dry planting, and you would keep it a little more that way. But I want this to be a little bit of a miniature tank and a little bit of a functional tank. And you can see that I've paid attention to the grain of the way the rocks were laid down. And then I've also tried, and granted this is with free rocks, and if I had more money and time, or as I find them, I will add them. But I've tried to make it appear as though this formation is somewhat natural, and it maybe broke up. You've seen that in mountain ranges where there's fault lines and it's uplifted here, and maybe the wind has eroded it, and just the lift of time, parts have fallen off, and there's tower structures. So if you're working with towers, it looks better to do multiple tower structures. Maybe ideally I do one more really big one back up in here or something like that, or another small one here to really drive home that point that, you know, this form of stone is a tower. Maybe like this, I don't know, but it's all movable and changeable, and you don't want it to look too perfect, if that makes sense, because then it looks like, oh, there's 3 ducks in a row there. That looks a little too intentional. So maybe you want it off just slightly, or maybe you want some imperfection. There's definite beauty in imperfection. See, that still looks intentional to me, so I don't know. I'll have to monkey with it in the future. But I just wanted to show you my hardscape and introduce you to kind of the fundamental basics of the aquascaping concept and idea. And I hope you've enjoyed this. I hope you've learned a little bit and had a little bit of fun, or entertained yourself and killed some time with this. I'll do an update video of when I finish planting it. I hope you guys are doing well. I hope this helps you out. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to contact me. And I will be back with you guys in another video shortly, probably after I sleep finally, in the wee morning hours. But if you guys like this, if you're still listening and it's a half an hour in, that's like a TV show. You know, thank you. I appreciate that. Maybe it means that you like this content enough that you'd want to subscribe. Maybe you want to even help out the channel and help me take care of these displays and these animals that you see, and help my schools of fish go through college, as I like to make a terrible pun. But that's where my Patreon account comes in, and there's a link in the description to that too. So wanted to thank you all for watching. Also wanted to thank the fish store in Lake City or Seattle. It's the oldest fish store in Seattle, and it's still a local run independent fish shop. I love going there. Things aren't always the cheapest there. Oftentimes they are comparable, but you know, you keep your local fish shops alive. Don't just shop on Amazon because it's cheaper. If you can spend the money to do aquascaping, you know, save money on rocks and go find them in nature. Watch my old video on in my files, in my old video playlists too. about how to use driftwood and rocks that you find elsewhere and use that money you save to go shop at a local fish store. I highly encourage it. And if you're in the Seattle area and you haven't checked it out, check out the fish store. It's literally called the fish store, and it used to be in a little blue house that was just right in the middle of this business district for 50, 60 years. Now it's on Lake City Way up in a little farther north than it used to be. So I wanted to thank them though for the substrate. He gave me some of that when I traded him some shrimp, and the shrimp, he definitely gave me a better deal on the shrimp than was like he gave me more money than I was expecting or deserved for the shrimp. So thank you so much there. Check his shop out. It's awesome that local shops, you can work that out. That's not going to happen at Petco. You're not going to have that relationship. So all right, guys. Well, take it easy. Take care of your fish. Take care of each other, and keep on swimming, guys. I'll talk to you later.